Welcome to the Show Me Podcast with your host, Jeff Livingston.
Like
every episode, a guest joins Jeff and discusses how
80s,
images tell
video.
stories and what makes them work or not.
Cool.
Hey everybody, welcome to Show Me Podcast. We're in season 2, and I have a very, very special guest with me today, Kirth Bobb, who's somebody I got to know over the past year or so, 2 years, and have done some work with and have really come to admire. Every time I hang out with Kirth, I find myself just rethinking photography. And anybody that's that strong and that passionate is somebody to get to know, and I couldn't help but ask him and share his wisdom with you all. So with that, Kirth, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wisdom sharing. Sure, you got the right person.
I'm positive, man, and I'm sure everybody else will feel that way about it. But before we start talking about you, usually the way we like to start the show is to have a photographer talk about either a very famous photograph or somebody that they find to be very influential. And you gave me somebody that I really came to enjoy as I researched for the show, and his name is Sebastio Salgado. And we have a photo with some miners going up a hill. And I think in my research, it became clear that this is one of his shots that's in a series that he became known for. Some of his photojournalism showing workers going up to a mine and the conditions that they deal with. And this guy is, he's from Brazil. He became an international treasure, really well known. I was really struck by his black and white work, his monochrome, and like the deep contrast. I wanted to ask you, why do you like this guy so much? Why do you find him so influential?
Man, like several reasons. I think Salgado, for me, you know, I've seen black and white photographs, and I'm always enamored by the absence of color, right? Because it just gives you, it allows you to speak fluently with just tones and light and shadow and everything in between. But Salgado's work, it always struck me, not because so much of his work, but more so like his story. Brazilian, I too am from South America. So like when I saw his work that he did in the gold mines, it reminded me of kind of the history of the country that I came from, Guyana. His work photographing indigenous spaces, and you know, Salgado, you know, he got a PhD in economics, I believe, from University of Sao Paulo. Am I saying that right? Mm-hmm. Right?
I think so. I mean, like, what do I know? I'm from Philly.
But he went on to work kind of in a global capacity, and
I think he's like a UNICEF World Resource or something like that.
Yeah, like international work.
Right.
Where, you know, he traveled to Rwanda, and I think it was at that point where he decided that he wanted to do photography. And his work, you know, like this guy is really out to save the planet and the world with his work, because he went from photographing, you know, landscapes, people, animals, and, you know, his story kind of revolves around being kind of, you know, growing up in Brazil, family, they were farmers, and just watching the land around his farm and his country be decimated. So he became radicalized, I guess is what you would call it. And a lot of his work, like the work that we were looking at here, where, you know, where he documented gold miners, is he always wanted to put a human, like bring to the forefront the human narrative of what industrialization truly means. You know, like we get all these comforts, but like we lose a lot of trees, and a lot of people work under some really horrible conditions to give us these luxuries.
Right.
So yeah.
The inconvenient truths of the situation, if you would.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And you know, it strikes me because like he never grew up, hey, I'm going to be a photographer. And that kind of resonates with me as well, having, you know, practiced a career in a totally different discipline, like a technical discipline, and then discovering photography and falling in love with it. But so Salgado was like, hey man, photography for me is life. Like it's not a job, it's just life.
Right.
And he goes as far as describing it as a language, where because a lot of his subjects, every human being has experienced to some degree, whether it's like a landscape or a human condition or something in nature. Like, his photography is a language that's universal, and he sees it that way. So it's kind of why I like Salgado.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I like my nature stuff and my landscapes, and I think actually going back there, and one of the things I was impressed with was the Genesis Project, which seems to be his last, I guess, major work in the sense when you consider a photography book is a major undertaking.
I have that book. It's massive.
Genesis. It's insane,
beautiful.
right? It's like $50. It's not so bad actually for the amount of photos that's in there.
I don't like
It's
to
insane.
think how much photo books cost because
well, they're printed on nice paper usually.
I know, right? But they're always good to have around and just like be inspired by. Get off the screen and into the pages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I looked through, like there was several shots, and I don't know if I included one of them, but I don't think I did. There was one of some seals looking around, and the whole narrative was the origins of life in some ways, right?
Yeah.
Like these animals all over the world, these beautiful landscapes, indigenous peoples. It was just really, really striking and stunning. But more than anything, like what you had talked about with the tonality and really like these rich, deep like lines and contrasts in these shots, which are monochrome again. It's like really hard to convey this deep texture. Just incredible dreamy landscapes that he produced, and great shots of wildlife. Whales were another shot he did. In the case of the seal was like maybe as far away from him as you are from me right now, or at least it looked that way. You don't know if he shot with a long lens. I was like, how did this guy do this? I mean, what was your take on that book thumbing through it?
So he described his approach is very unorthodox in that he described photographing, I think they were caimans or crocodiles, right? And I guess crocodiles have like this great field of vision where they can see like 180 degrees, right? So he was approaching them with a long lens. And he's like, they just got up and went into the water. So what he did was he got on his belly and he crawled like them towards the pond. He literally described it as them coming out of the pond and smiling at the camera. But like his approach to photography ties directly into his philosophy, because he was describing, I think it was an iguana, a photograph he did with an iguana in the scene. And he said, I see myself in that iguana because like, at a basic level, on a basic cellular level, like we're all one, but evolution took the iguana there and brought me here. So there's this like respect that he has when he photographs non-human subjects, even landscapes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like this
And
bird
you see it in
image
the
is
work.
like kind of like that too, right?
Like he's masterful. But again, I think it's one of those photographers where, I kind of know what his technical approach is, or, because he shared it, or like what he uses, but just understanding that behind all of that and behind the great work is this philosophy that he's developed and has allowed him to produce work irregardless of the subject.
There's a shot that was in the book that I included for our show, which is this shot of indigenous people. And, or this group of indigenous people. And I included it because I thought the shot was just striking. It was striking in the sense that it broke a lot of conventions that I'm used to seeing with indigenous people, where we get this stark photograph of somebody looking right into the camera, or they've got like their tribal makeup or their headdresses or whatever it might be. And instead we just had people just kind of laying about and lounging, right?
Yeah,
and it was really unique, very interesting.
He talked about his work in indigenous spaces, and he talks about the need for not just being kind of like a casual observer, and actually like taking in everything in this space, the smells, the taste. And like when I look at a photograph like this, it's beautiful, But I think part of what makes this beautiful is that he doesn't see himself as an other, right? He sees himself in these people. So there is a freedom there where he doesn't have to make the cliche photograph. He can simply make the photograph he feels. This is me getting in his head. But then, there's almost this natural beauty to the composition and the story. You're almost asked, like, just the way the space is oriented. You're like, wait, are they laying on? It's kind of dreamlike.
Yeah, you're wondering. You definitely. I found myself zooming in and looking at like different aspects of the picture. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your work. And this is a beautiful photograph. I love the stripes.
Really?
I really like this photograph, actually. Okay. And it wasn't very popular on Instagram compared to some of your other stuff, but I actually thought it was one of your stronger works. Like when I looked through your stream, I literally like scrolled up and down. I was like, bam, that's the shot. That's the shot I'm including. So I liked it. I wanted to ask you what was going on in your mind with this shot and what was happening.
So I've gotten into a space where I'm curious about portraits because I think I've been able to excel in like so many different genres. But I'm trying to prove to myself that they're all the same, right? Portraits are quiet. And a lot of times when I do street or wedding photography, I can kind of like be a fly on the wall, make the picture and kind of walk away. Not be a fly on the wall, but engage with the moment, disengage intentionally, and maybe go engage in another moment.
Well, I've seen you work with couples, and I can tell you that just from a third party, you seem to really engage them well, and they feel special around you, and I can tell that.
Good. Yeah. So with portraits, it's like the world gets really small, and the same way I may engage a street scene and sit there and observe, but not really worried about being seen. With a portrait, like that person know you're sitting there waiting for something.
Right.
It's like, how do you cut that time short to get them to cut the time short in terms of like getting them to be free enough in the space where something is going to happen and you're ready for it. Like that's kind of my practice in portraiture. This was, I don't remember what I was doing. I think I was setting up for a portrait. This is a colleague of mine. We work out of the same space. And it was her and another, her coworker. I said, guys, I need to test light. And it was a light test. And I said, maybe I'll shoot shallow today. And I think I was sitting there kind of wasting time. And she kind of like, I don't want to get out the frame. Like kind of like that. I was like, oh, wait, hold it.
And then boom, that's it. Because it's an incredibly Panama. What do you think of this photo? I mean, don't you think Panama's our sound engineer? Everybody say hi, Panama. Hey,
hi, Panama.
I mean, what do you think of this photo? I mean, there's a very tender, almost engaging, look on her face.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love
it. One of the things I struggle with is that I simply haven't been doing or sharing enough work that I've created. I create all my work for myself.
Right. Good for you. I could tell it's not like oversaturated pictures of the Washington Monument.
I mean, but even like I think photographers photograph what they're interested in, right?
Right.
I'm interested in people.
Right.
At this moment, like I've done some landscape stuff, and landscapes and architecture usually just studies of light for me.
I know what you're talking about. Like one of the greatest compliments most photographers give me, which they don't realize they're giving to me. They think they may be insulting me sometimes. Is like, I don't know what kind of photographer you are. I'm like, good.
Right. That's That's a thing, because I think once you start becoming identified with genres, then you've essentially, someone's going to say, okay, so 10 people are going to say, Jeff does really good weddings. Hire him. And someone is going to say, Jeff only does weddings.
Yeah.
Don't hire him.
Well, speaking of weddings and couples, here's another one of your shots. And I know that you do fantastic work with people, and particularly, I know like weddings, or some photographers hate weddings and everything, but you knock it out of the park with the weddings. And I wanted to ask you, like, have you developed your own ethos with that? Because I know you kind of run counter to some thoughts of like that oversaturated,
100%.
Like overlit kind of ambiance that some of these have.
The thing about weddings, I like to say everyone's a photographer till they have to photograph a wedding.
Right.
right? Can you light it? Can you pose it? Can you wait for it? Can you stage it? Can you make people cry from it?
Yeah.
Not make people cry, but invoke emotions, right?
Yeah.
My approach to weddings is relatively simple because I know that it's just human beings experiencing a thing, right? And since I'm a human being and I have experienced things, I go with it and I'm like, this is what, not I would want, but this is the truth of the matter, right? So the truth of the matter is people want to look back at photographs and no one wants to look back at a photograph and be sad.
Right.
And the truth of the matter about photographs, especially in wedding photographs, is that like they're really for the future. Like they're 199. It's a medium for telling a story of the existence of two people who decided that on one day, like, we're gonna do this thing called marriage, and whatever cultural element that's added to that, yeah. But essentially, like, we trust and love each other enough to like align, and that simplifies it for me, because then it's just a matter of like, well, so that's kind of the big thing that's happening. We're the pieces that are going to build a story, right? We're the pieces, like, who are the actors? Where's the story happening? What are these people feeling? And, I think wedding photography has, I know a lot of photographers are like, I hate weddings.
Yeah, but
I'm like,
it's just an event.
To each his own, it's an event, but there's a thing where, someone's you're gonna photograph someone at a wedding. You're gonna photograph a lot of people that are gonna die.
Yes.
And
they're gonna remember them being at their wedding, and you captured that moment.
100%.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my ethos around it.
That's cool. Well, the work is good.
Thank you.
And before we talk about the shutdown stories and kind of like the power of photography, because I thought that was a powerful moment working with you on that one.
Yeah.
Do you have a vision that you're really trying to achieve right now, or do you see yourself going somewhere? I mean, or is it a journey? Because I kind of sense like you have strong passion, right? Mm-hmm. Like I know you have like strong views of the way the camera works and the way people should be represented by the photographer.
Right.
But is that your mantra, or are you truly on that photographic journey where you don't know where you're going, really?
I think I know where I'm going.
Because I'm that lost guy. I'm lost. Just go where the camera takes me.
Yeah, there's a part of there. I think I'm going to infinity and beyond. I don't know.
Very Star Trek.
Isn't that Toy Story?
I guess, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's Toy Story.
I'm old now,
right?
man.
Yeah,
I just forget stuff.
Children. That's all I know. It's cartoons. No adult shows, man. Vision. It's for like photography is essentially a practice in my exploration of humanity.
Right.
My own. Right?
Yeah.
But like Salgado says, it's a language. And, I just got back from Italy. I don't speak a lick of Italian. But I met some people there who we're going to be in contact with, that as soon as I release these photographs, we're going to be able to communicate very clearly, you know? And I think sometimes there's so much divisiveness and other isms, and people look at other people as being separate from themselves.
Right.
But one of the things I always tell people, like, photographers I mentor, like, how do you get moments? How do you get emotions? Like, you shoot, you may photograph a Jewish wedding this weekend, and then next weekend you're photographing an Igbo or a Yoruba wedding, and then you're photographing an Indian. And like, look, tears are tears.
Right. You got to pay attention.
Like, tears are tears. You got to pay. You got to strip down you got to check all your baggage.
Right.
And just get to the humanness of it. And that's really what it is for me. It's almost like a practice in. It's a practice in empathy. It's a practice in like checking my ego. It's a life practice. It's it's me finding an artistic expression that I can go all the way inward with, so that I can express outwardly with.
Well, going back to the Salgado discussion about the indigenous people, I think actually that's really why that photo stood out to me. And I think it's kind of an interesting thread back, because like in the sense of the traditional indigenous person photo is them almost photographing the cultural accoutrement that's around them rather than the person.
Right.
And then what we saw there was like 7 people just lounging.
Right.
Right. Or 6 people, whatever it was.
It's like, are you gonna photo? You can either focus your photograph on someone's essence,
right,
or their existence.
Exactly, their existence,
right, and the existence is something that's undeniable in common.
Right.
Like, you're a dude from Philly,
right?
Like,
can you tell?
Right, right. Sorry, I banged the table. I'm a guy from Guyana. But we can find all these different things that we can stack up against each other.
Oh, yeah, man.
But what's really the only truth is that like we're both existing in this moment.
That's true.
And that's it.
Speaking of, let's talk about something that we did together in the past, which was the Shutdown Stories. Now, last January, it's amazing, right?
Wow.
Just like, 10
This
months
January.
ago. Yeah, this will be released probably in January, so it'll be a year ago when this is released.
Okay.
But when this thing was released, I mean, like when that happened, the shutdown, I mean, people were out of work here. They were in food lines. They were like getting really desperate because the thing went on for weeks on end. So you and I decided to use our cameras and capture some portraits and help these people a little bit with like new LinkedIn profile pictures. We didn't do anything fancy. We were like literally almost saying like, this is what this photo's for, and we're going to take that.
Yeah.
And people loved it. That thing got shared left and right, got picked up by all the local media. I was just going to ask you, first of all, reflect a little bit on that. But, based on that experience, what do you think photography can really do for people and for the world?
Jeez.
Yeah, no small question.
Right. Seriously, I should have prepared for this.
Right.
So Shutdown Stories, I think this is when you and I first started hanging out. I was like, this dude's crazy. But then I was like, if I ever have any crazy ideas, I'm gonna tell this guy first, because he's gonna figure out a way to do it.
Right.
I think photography could be a vehicle for empathy. Period. Right. When I first came to the U.S. and I worked in like the private sector, you live in D.C. and you hear kind of there's an avatar for federal workers. They're like Black, African American, people of color. They're lazy, and they're just like mooching, essentially, right?
Not true.
Not true. But but I'll tell you this: like there was a point where I said something like offensive to someone who had worked in federal service, because I was like, nah, I'm gonna be a contractor. I don't want to be like the lazy federal workers. And it was like they still tell me about that up to this day, but that came from a place of ignorance. And I think Shutdown Stories, I remember being at home and looking out my window and thinking like, why are these people walking their dogs, right? The neighborhood is relatively diverse now. And it's like, oh, wait, these guys are shut down.
Yeah.
And I think it's an empathy machine, man, because you look at the portraits and the people that we met, and everyone's represented.
Right. And they're good-looking people,
And they're good-looking people.
Right.
They're good-looking people. They're real people with, like, real stories. People who, and then I remember chatting with a friend, and he said something like, hey, people should just be saving more money so that when these things happen. And I'm like, that's cool to say, but actually that's not cool to say. It's easy for you to say.
Right.
But, some people that we met, they had
this divorces.
This could be like the worst
relatives.
Possible time. Exactly.
Right.
This could be like the worst possible time to lose your income.
Yes.
And your means of feeding your family.
And I think like one of the things that came across to me too was it didn't matter that they were going to get paid later. That was another thing. Well, it doesn't matter; they'll get reimbursed later.
Right.
It didn't matter because they didn't have the cash, and they had these mortgage payments. They had stuff that they had to
and a lot of these people,
things for.
most of these people loved their jobs.
Yeah, they care about the country.
They cared about, like, they were civic servants. Get it? Like,
right.
Highly educated, capable of making probably a lot more money. But they decided, like, you know what? I'm going to serve. I'm going to serve in this capacity. And just being in that space with these people really helped me change my perspective a bit. Yeah.
That's cool. All right. Well, with that, everybody, thank you, Mr. Kirth, for coming on
Thanks
board.
for having me.
And I hope everybody will check you out and find you. What's the best place for them to go to if they want to learn more about your work?
I hide a lot.
Behind the camera.
Right. No, at Kirth Bobb is my Instagram. I'm not as active as I probably should be. No, I'm as active as I need to be. We talk about this a lot.
Yeah, man, you're rocking it.
You know,
the guy's busy. He's doing just what he needs to.
Yeah, you're busy, and then, you know, it's like family. And, you know, if I'm going to choose to do something I love, then got to do it on your terms.
Nobody's going to write on your gravestone, rock star, Instagram,
right.
DC photographer.
But yeah, it's interesting looking back at these Shutdown Story pictures because, you know, another thing photography allows me to do and allows people to do is just get out of the house and experience the world, right?
Yes.
A lot of these people had not been out the house.
Right. Yeah, no, they were just sitting around watching the TV,
they were just
hoping
sitting
it was
around.
ending.
And a lot of people are like, I guess I wanted to just get out the house and hang out with other people.
Yeah.
Because we work so much, our jobs become our communities sometimes, right? So it was kind of cool just, you know, chatting with people and meeting new people and yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's a great way to end.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Show Me podcast with Jeff Livingston. More shows, sponsorship, and donation information are available at showmepodcast.com.
Wayne's World.